Hello, everyone. Greg Michlig here, President and CEO at CUInsight.com. And on this episode of Three Questions, it's a pleasure to welcome Elissa McCarter LaBorde, President and CEO of the World Council of Credit Unions, and Mike Reuter, President of the Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions. Elissa, Mike, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, and this is really a special episode of Three Questions, noting your announcement of the Rally the Movement campaign at your Champions Voices event last evening. I'm sure everyone is eager to hear more about that, so let's get to the three questions. Now, what is Rally the Movement, and how are World Council and the Worldwide Foundation of Credit Unions working together on this initiative?
Yeah, historically, the WOCCU and the Worldwide Foundation have always partnered on responding to crises facing our global credit union movement, and we're continuing to rally together to rally the movement around an awareness and fundraising campaign to encourage all layers of our global credit union system to hopefully rally and step forward and support in saving international credit union development projects that are located around the world. Obviously, as we've read the headlines, there's a freeze on foreign aid, and that has been, a key cause of this disruption of these critical international credit union development projects. Real communities, real member lives, households in different parts of the world are significantly impacted, and it really has the long-term impact of destabilizing a lot of these member communities and member livelihoods. So, and we all know that no matter where we are in the global credit union system, we all stand as a pillar of stability using credit unions to continue to advance financial inclusion. And so the Worldwide Foundation and the World Council have long history in responding to these types of crises. Our work in Ukraine is one specific example. And so we just want to continue to rally the movement around collaboration, awareness, and hopefully some support to continue to help us advance key international credit union development work around the world.
I'll just add two things, Greg. Whether you welcome the overhaul of the federal government or you are reeling from the flood of changes that we've seen in the last several days, even hours, where we feel that we must preserve our place is that place of global leadership as a global credit union movement. And right now, that place of global leadership is at risk. Never in my career have I been faced with the reality of losing almost 70% of my annual revenue in less than 90 days. We will survive, but our ability to have World Council of Credit Unions with the global presence working alongside credit unions in countries all around the world is really challenged now with this sudden abrupt freeze. And what I hope with Rally the Movement is we would be able to preserve some of our work in some of the countries. Because at the end of the day, friends don't leave friends stranded. And I don't want to see credit unions leave their members stranded. And this is where we are right now, is we have credit unions we committed to, and we don't want to leave them without the support and at least finish some of the work that we started.
And that support is so important. And in part, you probably touched on some of these already, but really, how will WOCCU put the funds to use?
Well, we have a target of $3 million. That is what we hope to be able to raise in the next 6 weeks. We have had, prior to the stop work orders that we received, we had programs in roughly 7 countries for this year that were committed at about nearly $12 million. We realize the situation we're in now, that we are not going to be able to sustain that level of programmatic activity, but we have a strategy to have 3 programs on 3 continents, 3 countries on 3 continents. That's in Guatemala, in Ukraine, and in Kenya. So let me just speak really briefly. In Guatemala, we have been working for many years with our member there. It's branded as Micope, across Guatemala, a really unique system of credit unions I had the pleasure to go there when I first joined WOCCU and saw that a national presence in Guatemala is through an average deposit base of about $200. So they have a very deep rural outreach of working with at-risk youth and at-risk women, and especially with the recent deportation moves of the U.S., they are now accommodating people that are returning home or families that are being impacted by severe income inequalities and pressure on that economy. So we see this as a critical need that we want to at least retain a couple of staff to continue to work with Micope in those rural areas with the most vulnerable communities that they serve. And Ukraine is where we have the biggest need. We were supposed to disperse last week about $500,000 to allow farmers to receive loans that they had expressed demand for to meet the planting season. It's spring coming very quickly. And we have been working alongside credit unions prior to the Russian invasion, now all throughout the war. And they were really counting on this liquidity coming in the time that they needed. We've not been able to get local credit lines to address those capital constraints. And so again, our ability to keep at least a couple of our staff on the ground working alongside those credit unions in this critical period to try to look at economic stabilization, that's really our goal there. And finally, in Kenya, we've been working with the Kenyan system with 10 different savings and credit cooperatives, SACCOs, to address things like reaching young membership, looking at digital services, looking at businesses that have been impacted by the adverse effects of climate change and drought or floods, seasonal weather patterns that have disrupted many of those communities. So a lot of innovation that we were doing, and we've been speaking with our member there, the African Confederation, ACOSCA, to see how can we marry resources, how can we leverage expertise and be able to continue to support at least some of that work, because it is critically important that we show leadership in Africa and that we address some of these issues around reaching young people and reaching small businesses that are often left out of formal financial services, certainly overlooked by the banks.
And you've kind of touched on some of these already, I think, but for those credit union leaders who don't know much about the international development work World Council does, what's your message to them, and why is it important to the work that they do as well?
Yeah, our movement is stronger when we think globally, locally, and nationally, kind of all at once. And I think a key role historically and today, of course, for the World Council is always to be bringing this thinking to the forefront through the results and the impacts of these development projects that Elissa touched on. Sharing those results through engagement initiatives, through key events like the World Credit Union Conference, but more so inviting engagement across all layers of the global credit union system. Our network is our net worth, and that's kind of an unofficial mantra at the World Council and bringing everyone together, and that's a unique position we sit in. Our challenges across our movement are not fully unique to one country. Pain points around financial inclusion, digital transformation, regulatory pressures, member engagement. We all face these challenges. And so these projects and the international development work that World Council does continues to touch on and overcome these key pain points that we all face. And so we can learn a lot from one another through these projects. And so continuing to drive the engagement. And then just, leaning into the cooperative principles, obviously, of rallying with the World Council, with the foundation, with our global peers, cooperation amongst cooperatives, concern for community. Those are two key cooperative principles. Our global credit union champions are at their best when they stand with us side by side and help us fill a gap to help mitigate a key crisis. And so I've personally seen a lot of the beneficiaries that Elissa's referring to. I had the privilege to travel to Ukraine last April, so I got to see a lot of the member farmers and talk to the credit union associations around how important the work is and how important the support is. And so those livelihoods and those individuals and people like them in Kenya and Guatemala and in Ukraine are under threat because of this crisis.
Greg, let me just add one thing, because I hear this a lot and I want to drive a straight line back to the US credit union system, because I think that line is sometimes not seen. A big part of what we do is advocate for credit unions in front of the world stage at the international standard setters. And I think what some people don't understand is that our best data often, our best stories, our best evidence of the credit union difference is often through some of these projects where we are working in countries that are truly making a difference in advancing financial inclusion, reaching the underserved in communities, showing why credit unions are different than banks. And the Don't Tax My Credit Union is about that credit union difference. And so one of the risks we have is that inability to have deeper data, evidence, storytelling that feeds into our advocacy strategy that allows us to be that first line of defense in front of the Basel Committee, in front of the UN, in front of the G20, when we talk about making sure regulations don't impact adversely small financial institutions that serve a critical role in every financial market. So there is a straight line back to the US system and how we all talk about the credit union difference in front of our lawmakers here in the US and hopefully rally the movement to allow World Council to continue to serve in that role of global leadership for the credit union movement.
Yeah, and the work is so important. I thank you for making that connection and tying it back to the credit union system here in the U.S. And before we wrap up on this, I'm just curious if you have any final thoughts for our audience or any asks, perhaps, of our viewers today.
I would just add, continue to engage with us, connect with us on our website, WOCCU.org. I think it's really important to understand, the ongoing work that our advocacy team is doing in partnership with America's credit unions and the U.S. league system. Obviously, connecting into the fundraising element of the campaign. Raising $3 million over the next 6 weeks. It's a robust, but we think achievable target. And again, if we all marshal our resources and efforts together, we should be able to get there. And so, just continue to tap into us and connect with us at WOCCU.org. I think is the main hub of engagement for the Rally the Movement campaign.
Thank you, Greg.
It's been a pleasure to connect with you today. And I just want to say a final thank you to all who tuned in for this episode of 3 Questions. And I encourage you to do what you can in support of this important initiative. We'll see you next time.